Welcome, Baltz families, to this week's Sunday Storytime. Get ready to mark your calendars with this week's news and coming events, which will be followed by a news story for the week. Can't wait to find out what it is. And the final segment will be our Mindful Minute with Mrs. Papa. Stay tuned. Hello. It was great to see so much excitement at our annual meet and greet, and we are eager for a new year to begin. Some notes about the first day of school. School begins on August 26th. There will be staff to guide students to their homerooms. Parents, please say goodbye to your children outside before they come into the building. Kindergarten students will have a split week during the first week, and our dismissal time is 3:50. We have a new routine for dismissing car riders. Parents, please stay in your car, join the car line, which will form a double line through the parking lot. Another note, students have off on Friday, August 30th, and Monday, September 2nd.
Fue muy emocionante ver a todas las familias en nuestro evento anual de venir y conocer al maestro o maestra. El primer día de clase será el lunes 26 de agosto. Habrá personal asignado para ayudar a los alumnos a localizar sus aulas. Los padres deberán despedirse de sus hijos afuera antes de que los niños ingresen al edificio. Por favor, tengan en cuenta que durante la primera semana de clase los alumnos de kinder tendrán un inicio escalado. El horario de salida será a las 3:50 de la tarde. Los padres que vengan a recoger en automóvil deberán permanecer dentro de su automóvil y colocarse en la fila doble de vehículo que se formará en el estacionamiento. Les recordamos que no tendremos clase el viernes 30 de agosto y tampoco el lunes septiembre 2.
Good evening, Baltz Bears. This is Mrs. Palma, Baltz's assistant principal. I'm here for the second edition of Sunday Storytime, and today I brought one of my favorite books with me. This book is called The Little House, and it's written by Virginia Lee Burton. Once upon a time, there was a little house way out in the country. She was a pretty little house, and she was strong and well built. The man who built her so well said, "This little house shall never be sold for gold or silver, and she will live to see our great-great-grandchildren's great-great-grandchildren living in her." The little house was very happy as she sat on a hill and watched the countryside beside her. She watched the sunrise in the morning and watched the sunset in the evening. Day followed day, each one a little different, and the one before, but the little house stayed just the same. In the nights, she watched the moon grow from a thin new moon to a full moon, then back again to a thin old moon, and then there was no moon. She watched the stars way off in the distance. She could see the lights of the city. The little house was curious about the city and wondered what would it be like to live there. Time passed quickly for the little house as she watched the countryside slowly change with the seasons. In the spring, when the days grew longer and the sun warmer, she waited for the first robin to return from the south. She watched the grass turn green, she watched the buds on the trees swell, and the apple trees burst into blossom. She watched the children playing in the brook. In the long summer days, she sat in the sun and watched the trees cover themselves with leaves, and the white daisies cover the hill. She watched the gardens grow, and she watched the apples turn red and ripen. She watched the children swimming in the pool. In the fall, when the days grew shorter and the nights colder, she watched the first frost turn the leaves to bright yellow and orange and red. She watched the harvest gathered and the apples picked. She watched the children going back to school. In the winter, when the nights were long and the days short and the countryside was covered with snow, she watched the children Crossing the roads and skating year following year, the apple trees grew old and new ones were planted. The children grew up and they went away to the city. And now the lights from the city seem brighter and closer. One day, the little house was surprised to see a horseless carriage coming down the winding country road. Pretty soon, there were more of them on the road and fewer carriages pulled by horses. Pretty soon, along came some surveyors and surveyed a line in front of the little house. Pretty soon came along a steam shovel and dug a road through the hill covered with daisies. Then some trucks came and dumped big stones on the road, and then some trucks with little stones and some trucks with tar and sand, and finally a steamroller came and rolled it all smooth, and the road was done. Now the little house watched the trucks and automobiles going back and forth to the city. Gasoline stations, roadside stands, and small houses followed the new road. Everyone and everything was much faster now than before. More roads were made and the countryside was divided into lots. More houses and bigger houses, apartment houses, tenement houses, schools and stores and garages. They spread all over the land and they crowded around the little house. No one wanted to live in her and take care of her anymore. She couldn't be sold for gold or silver, so she just stayed there and watched. Now, it was not so quiet and peaceful at night. Now, the lights of the city were bright and very close, and the streetlights shone all night. This must be living in the city, thought the little house, and didn't know whether she liked it or not. She missed the field of daisies and the apple trees dancing in the moonlight. Pretty soon, there were trolley cars going back and forth in front of the little house. They went back and forth all day and part of the night. Everyone seemed to be very busy, and everyone seemed to be in a hurry. Pretty soon, there was an elevated train going back and forth above the little house. The air was filled with dust and smoke, and the noise was so loud that it shook the little house. Now she couldn't tell when spring came, or summer, or fall, or winter. It all seemed about the same. Pretty soon, there was a subway going back and forth underneath the little house. She couldn't see it, but she could feel it and hear it. People were moving faster and faster. No one noticed the little house anymore. They hurried by without a glance. Pretty soon, they tore down the apartment houses and tenement houses around the little house and started digging big cellars, one on each side. The steam shovels dug down 3 stories on one side and 4 stories on the other. Pretty soon, they started building up. They built up 25 stories on one side and 35 stories on the other. Now, the little house only saw the sun at noon and didn't see the moon or the stars at night at all because the lights of the city were too bright. She didn't like living in the city. At night, she used to dream of the country and the field of daisies and the apple trees dancing in the moonlight. The little house was very sad and lonely. Her paint was cracked and dirty. Her windows were broken and her shutters hung crookedly. They looked shabby, though she was just as good of a house as ever. Then, one fine morning in spring, along came the great-great-granddaughter of the man who built the little house so well. She saw the shabby little house, But she didn't hurry by. There was something about the little house that made her stop and look again. She said to her husband, "That little house looks just like the little house that my grandmother lived in when she was a little girl, only that little house was all the way out in the country, on a hill covered with daisies and apple trees growing around." They found out that it was the very same house, so they went to the movers to see if the little house could be moved. The movers looked at the little house all over and said, "Sure, this house is as good as ever. She's built so well we could move her anywhere." So they jacked up the little house, put her on wheels. Traffic was held up for hours, and they slowly moved her out of the city. At first, the little house was frightened, but after she got used to it, she rather liked it. They rolled along the big road, and they rolled along some little roads, and they were way out into the country. When the little house saw the green grass and heard the birds singing, she didn't feel sad anymore. They went along and along, but they couldn't seem to find just the right place. They tried the little house here, and then they tried her there. Finally, they saw a little hill, and it was in the middle of a field of apple trees growing around. "There," said the great-great-granddaughter, "that's just the place." "Yes, it is," said the little house to herself. A cellar was dug on top of the hill, and slowly they moved the house from the road to the hill. The windows and shutters were fixed, and once again they painted her a lovely shade of pink. As the little house settled down on her new foundation, she smiled happily. Once again, she could watch the sun, the moon, the stars, and once again she could watch spring and summer and fall and winter come and go. Once again, she was lived in and taken care of. Never again would she be curious about the city, and never again would she want to live there. The stars twinkled above her, a new moon was coming up, it was spring, and all was quiet and peaceful in the country. All right, Bald Sparrows, I hope you have a wonderful week coming up, and I'm looking forward to seeing you soon.
Hi, Balts community. Today we're going to talk about self-talk. Did you know that everyone talks to themselves? Most of the time you don't even realize that you're doing this. This is called self-talk. Self-talk is the voice we hear inside our head when we're awake. Sometimes our self-talk can be helpful. That's called positive self-talk. Like when you think, "Ooh, stay calm," or "keep trying." Sometimes our self-talk can get in the way of us being successful though, and we call that negative self-talk. Here's an example of this. "This is the worst day ever," or "I'm no good at this." Self-talk is super connected to how we think and feel. Positive self-talk helps you think positive thoughts that then lead to having positive feelings. Guess what? You're the boss of your self-talk. Here are some things that you can do to help the voice inside your head talk to you in a positive way. Make a list of positive self-talk statements. Here are some examples of this. "I can do this." "Calm down." "Take 3 deep breaths." "Count to 10." "Keep trying." Now, practice saying these statements out loud every day. You might even want to stand in front of a mirror to do this. And last, practice changing negative thoughts to positive ones. Here's an example of how you might do this. "I only did well on that test because I got lucky." Well, you can change that thought to a positive one. "I did well on that test because I was prepared." Or "I did well on that test because I'm smart." When you're worrying about your schoolwork or feeling uncomfortable around your classmates, remember a positive thought can really help. This week in school, try some positive self-talk.